What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and another Outriders video, or more specifically another Outriders tier list. Now, why am I making a legendary weapons tier list this late in the game, this long after Outriders has been out? Well, two reasons really. First of all, I've never actually created a tier list for this. I did make a tier list back in the day for the legendary armor sets, but I never did something equivalent for the weapons. And reason number two, with a huge influx of players set to return to the game when worldslayer comes out at the end of June, hopefully this list can be then used by me to actually add those additional new weapons, the 30 new weapons which are coming to the game, to this list, so that we can finally have a comprehensive list. So let's get the groundwork done. Let's rate the 46 legendary weapons which are in the game right now. Now if we go over to the tier list that I've prepared, essentially the qualities, or let's say the categories that we're going to be putting them into, is of course starting at the top with best in slot. I think that's self-explanatory. It means that generally speaking, you auto include this weapon. Doesn't matter which kind of build. If you're using an anomaly build with any of the 4 classes, then this would be a good weapon to use, and likewise for any of the bullet builds. Solid choice would be weapons which are not which have a better option available above them in best in slot, but which are still really good. And can be a filler if you don't actually have access to the weapon that is in best in slot. Then limited use, what I try to represent with this category would be something like weapons which do work, but they need the entire build to essentially be structured around them, or that they're very kind of almost niche in a way, and that they really only work in one kind of way of playing or one kind of way of building your character. Then the fourth one is mod only. So this is obviously just that the only reason you would want this weapon to drop, or you'd want to pick this up, is so that you could strip the mod off it. You'd never actually use this weapon. And then last but not least, there's useless. Now the difference of course between mod only and useless is at least mod only have decent mods that you can strip off the weapons, and it's not completely worthless, whereas useless is exactly that. It is completely worthless, and this weapon doesn't actually even have a good mod on them. Now the way that one last thing, of course, the way that we're rating these is we're taking into account the actual weapon itself. So we're not judging guns purely on their mods. We are judging them on if you were to actually use that weapon, keep the strong mod on them, and actually replace it with another top tier 3 mod, essentially turning that into the primary weapon that you use. Now we're starting this list off not alphabetical, but rather according to weapon class. So we'll do assault rifles first, and then we'll sort of progress through it class by class. So starting with assault rifles first, we have Absolute Zero, which also coincidentally happens to be the first one in our list here. Now, Absolute Zero is a legendary assault rifle, and basically its mod ultimate freezing bullets would be the reason why you would want this weapon. So this is the best version of ultimate freezing bullets, or rather of freezing bullets, which has the lowest cooldown. And so this essentially freezes enemies when you shoot them with this. Now because this is a legendary assault rifle, it has a decent range, it has a decent fire rate, and it has a decent clip size. And I have enjoyed using this weapon to play in a Borealis or an ice flavored Technomancer build. That's definitely not best in slot, but I do feel that if you use the ultimate freezing bullets on here and you add on another mod like maybe Killing Spree on here, which has decent ramp up for a firepower base, this can be an actual very solid choice for that kind of playstyle. Of course, frost or freeze is very much built into the identity of Technomancer, so that does kind of make it a little bit niche in a way, but I've definitely found some use with Absolute Zero, and I do enjoy it. I think freezing is one of the more powerful status effects in the game, due to the fact that it essentially stops something dead cold, and when something's stopped and frozen, it can't deal damage to you, but it also can't run away, and it's essentially frozen, so you can easily expose crit spots, you can easily shoot heads. And it's a great way to be of assistance to members of your team, because they themselves are also going to have an easier time actually shooting those enemies and just getting around the battlefield. So all in all, I think Absolute Zero is a solid choice. The next assault rifle on our list is Air to the Desert, which coincidentally was the legendary weapon, the very last one that I needed to complete my full set of 46. It was basically my unicorn. I just could never get it to drop, and finally when it did drop on stream, much celebration was had. But Air to the Desert's main mod on it, the reason, the mod that you'd want from it, is Sandstorm, which essentially creates a AoE sandstorm that deals damage over 5 seconds wherever you shoot with this gun on a cooldown. And the only problem that I really have with this is that the sandstorm itself doesn't track. So there where it pops is where it stays, and it basically conjures up the sand. That kind of makes it a little bit more niche, because the problem is that if you have fast moving enemies or enemies that are coming towards you, like in monster maps, then there where it pops, the enemies will move out of that area, and essentially you will be wasting that DPS. Now there is something to be said for area denial with this weapon, where if enemies are running at you in a line, you can hit the front one and all of them will then essentially be running through that. That's pretty cool, I guess. But the problem is that this is very much like a niche weapon in a way, and it'll depend on which map you use and also which other mod you pair Sandstorm with. Now this is still, however, a tactical assault rifle, which is why I feel that it's okay to stick this into the limited use category and not into the mod only. Tactical assault rifles are really good in the game, and there's something to be said for their balancing being very heavily flavored toward great damage profile, great accuracy, great range, and all of that. So you can almost never go wrong with using a tactical assault rifle, especially if you play a bullet class. Well, most definitely if you play a bullet class, and that's really the reason why we're not sticking this into mod only. Then carrying on with our assault rifles, we get to another tactical assault rifle, which is the Inferno Seed. Now, Inferno Seed has a mod called Wrath of Moloch on it that says critical hits cause an explosion, dealing damage and inflicting burn on enemies within a 5-meter radius. This is on a super short cooldown of 3 seconds as well. So again, this fits very well into the profile of this weapon. You are going to be doing a lot of critical hits because of its accuracy and because of the range that you have with this weapon, and because you're obviously often using this in a bullet build, like something towards a techno. Now, unfortunately, the best in slot for techno really is a purple. It is an epic tactical assault rifle with the correct stats on. This has armor pierce, close range damage, and long range damage. I would say that obviously better here would be crit damage instead of armor pierce, would make this weapon, you know, ideal. But nonetheless, Inferno Seed is a solid choice, especially if you don't have access to a purple, a really good rolled epic tactical assault rifle. Then Inferno Seed can be a fantastic fallback, and almost in a way best in slot. If we didn't have, if for example epic assault rifles couldn't roll as high damage, or as they could, and maybe could only roll up to 90k or something like that, so this would be clearly like a leader in terms of DPS by like 10k or something like that, then absolutely Inferno Seed would be considered best in slot. But for now it just falls short, unfortunately, due to those epic variants. Then moving on to a weapon called the Master Tool, which is a sharpshooter variant of an assault rifle. Now this has a unique tier 3 mod on it called Dome of Protection, which says that killing shots summon a bullet stopping dome for 5 seconds, and it's also on a 5-second cooldown. Again, this to me is and then it's got Perpetuum Mobile on it, which is essentially a reloading mechanism. And I've seen some people actually replace Dome of Protection because it's so fucking wonky, and actually put something else in here. But the problem is that this weapon is not really suited for bullet builds due to its relatively small clip size. It only has 15 bullets due to the fact that it's a sharpshooter variant, and I really think that that's the reason why this essentially falls dead. Well, the other reasons I would say is also because it has armor pierce, healing received, and close range damage on it, which are it's a really bad combination of substats on a weapon like this. So I would definitely actually say that this is probably, I would consider this, unless you're looking to farm Perpetuum Mobile, but Perpetuum Mobile, because it's a tier 2 mod, can roll on many other places. So I think the Master Tool for me would actually be useless. I don't think I've ever played with this weapon for longer than 5 minutes just to test it, and those results were severely disappointing. So yeah. Next up, the Juggler, another assault rifle, also a standard variant. This has scrap magazine on it, which essentially says that the first bullet after reload becomes this like almost like anomaly projectile, like a grenade that deals a whole bunch of damage. I've been playing around with this a lot. And you know, sticking this onto sniper rifles and other kinds of guns, shotguns, pump action shotguns and stuff, and seeing what kind of damage I can farm out of this. Now, to have this on an assault rifle with a clip size of 40 is kind of like in a way impractical, because the point is you want it on something that you can capitalize on that reload mechanic as much as possible, and at the same time it's a weird thing to pair it with, right? So it comes paired with Minefield, which essentially drops little explosives around the enemy when you kill it. But I've definitely messed around with scrap grenade on sniper rifles, like I said, and for me I would say that again, there are so many better options in terms of assault rifles that tier above this in the legendary, that I would really only consider actually stripping this mod off there, like I said, to goof around with sniper rifles. So that then would mean that the juggler would be a mod only choice. Next up, we have the Thunderbird. Now, the Thunderbird was coincidentally the first ever legendary I got, and it was back in the days of the beta, or the demo rather, right before Outriders came out on the 1st of April to, what was that, 2020? Jesus, I think it's 2020. Either which way, Thunderbird, I really enjoyed it. Ultimate Storm Whip is great. It shoots down lightning on top of enemies. It's a great way of introducing additional point damage to it. I think it would be, or things that I've goofed around with is comparing that with, you know, an AoE effect. In other words, you have a very strong damage pull down effect, and then you also have a very strong, you know, AoE effect. And since this is a standard variation assault rifle, it means that you have a fairly big clip size. It's very accurate, and you can essentially push these bullets out and proc this effect very often. So I like the Thunderbird. Unfortunately, it's completely outclassed by something like Absolute Zero. It's completely outclassed by something like Inferno Seed, and it doesn't matter if you replace Ultimate Storm Whip with something else and keep Trigger, which is the 30% critical damage is returned to you as health. Either which way, those just aren't really good. I would say the one saving grace here would probably be the fact that this gun also has status power on it. So if you're looking for a way to push up your status power by a relatively big percentage, then this can be an option that's available to you. However, Ultimate Storm Whip itself, I mean, I suppose you could maybe want to get that mod off there, but for me, unfortunately, Thunderbird in a weird way actually sits somewhere between limited use and mod only. I think for now, and I might change my mind as we go through this list, to be quite honest, but I think for now what I'd probably end up doing is kind of sticking it into, I would say, mod only, maybe if you just want Ultimate Storm Whip to mess around with that. But Ultimate Storm Whip on its own is not that strong that you'd really want to. So are we really gonna say that Thunderbird is useless? Damn. I mean, if you compare it to something like Air to the Desert, Absolute Zero, and Inferno Seed, it definitely, you know, doesn't feature as strongly. And of course, Scrap Grenade, I think, is a much more powerful mod than Ultimate Storm Whip. I'm gonna stick it into useless for now. It hurts my heart like a little bit, because I like the gun, and I remember it very favorably being due to the fact that it was the first ever legendary that dropped for me, and I really liked enjoying it back in the, or using it rather, back in the demo. But it is what it is. Some guns just aren't as good as you remember them. So nostalgia is a powerful thing. So moving on, then we have Time Ripper, which is also another legendary assault rifle. There are fucking tons of these. And this is also a standard variant. Now this has ultimate stiffening, which basically your bullets inflict slow on enemies, and then this has Gravedigger's Frenzy as well, which says critical shots increase your critical damage by 50% for 5 seconds. Now slow is a funny status in the game. There's not a lot of stuff that inflicts it on enemies, and it can be considered quite powerful. Of course, it's not as good as something like Freeze, because there aren't a lot of additional damage to slow mods that you get in the game, first of all, and secondly, even though something is slowed, it means that it is still attacking, it is still doing any kind of melee animation or anything like that, so it can still be a problem. Now the actual skin itself, this is one of the better looking guns in the game. Time Ripper looks fucking fantastic as a mod, but if we were rating guns based on that, the rating system on this would be, you know, a hell of a lot different. But for now, I would definitely say that Time Ripper, I would also kind of consider it to be basically useless. I don't think ultimate stiffening is something that I've stuck on a bunch of other guns before. I've certainly not had any reason to prefer that over something like raw damage or anything that boosts anomaly. So unfortunately, it's also useless. Then moving on to another, and our last assault rifle, can you believe it? It is the Voodoo Matchmaker. Now, Voodoo Matchmaker is a standard variant assault rifle, and it has a very, some would say, broken mod on it called Ultimate Damage Link. These link up two enemies sharing 30% of their weapon damage and 10% of their anomaly damage. I think I think this is the old version of the tooltip, if I'm not mistaken, that I have on the screenshot here. It might be a little bit more now. I know some of these were tweaked, but nonetheless, ultimate damage link is super efficient if used correctly. And due to the way how it interacts with certain other mods, it's something that I believe still is really broken in the game and isn't working the way that it's supposed to. But be that as it may, it is a mod that features in a lot of people's builds, but not on the Voodoo Matchmaker. They take the mod off and they go stick it on other guns. Unless you keep it on this here and you actually just put another another mod on here so that you have ultimate damage link and you have this on. It has a 40 clip size and it is an assault rifle, so you have a relatively high rate of fire. So I definitely think that this is a gun that people would want the mod for. I just don't see a lot of people running around with a Voodoo Matchmaker in their hands. So I think for this case, I will probably say that the Voodoo Matchmaker is probably used in situations where you just want the mod. Then we arrive at double guns, which is a category or a class of weapon which I don't necessarily enjoy or really get the idea of what it's really good at. But nonetheless, the first double gun we're going to look at is Amber Vault. Now, Amber Vault has Killing Spree on it, which is a highly sought after mod, unless you are thinking of using something like, I mean, generally speaking, on bullet builds, you're either using Killing Spree or you're using Dark Sacrifice, which comes off another weapon, which we're going to look at a little bit later. Now, nonetheless, I have messed around with Amber Vault and putting Killing Spree and Dark Sacrifice on the gun. And it is hilarious because it does turn the weapon into kind of like a bullet hose, or a really powerful bullet hose. Of course, the thing with double guns is they have a relatively high rate of fire, they have a semi-decent clip size, but the problem with them is relatively or let's say the relative accuracy of the weapon is not great. So you generally have to be very close to enemies, and that means that it's not suited for most builds where you're trying to, like for instance Technomancer, shoot from the medium to long range area so you can get all those additional buffs rather that are present in the talent tree. So I think it's a fun gun. It's like a meme gun to use, but in the end, you're much better off with just getting yourself a really good tactical assault rifle and putting Dark Sacrifice or Killing Spree on that tactical assault rifle, and then whichever other mod you can get on there. But you do want this so that you can get your hands on Killing Spree. For me, this has kind of like limited use because let's say, for instance, you don't have access to a good epic tactical assault rifle, you don't have access to Absolute Zero, you don't have access to Inferno Seed, you don't even have access to Air to the Desert. This can be a really good fallback weapon for a bullet Technomancer until you get one of those guns. So I definitely think this has some limited use, but some people would probably disagree with me and say that it's only really good to get the mod off it, but be that as it may. The next double gun we have is the Imploder. I think the model for this weapon looks fantastic, but its tier 3 mod Deadly Disturbance says critical shots activate an unstable anomaly affecting your enemy, causing him to explode, dealing damage to all other enemies in a 5-meter radius. I haven't messed around with this gun a lot, and it's mostly due to the fact that I think that there are better mods out there that do kind of like the same thing as this, like Bone Shrapnel for instance. But the other reason is because this is on a double gun, and double guns just are not as good as assault rifles, or if you want something with a massive clip that you can use as a fucking bullet hose, then an LMG is basically better for that. So to me, I also don't see a lot of people running around with Deadly Disturbance on their weapons. So for me, this is, I would say, I mean, I gotta put it between mod only and useless, but I'm gonna go ahead and put it in useless. I've certainly never used this on any one of my to do anything fucking remotely cool, so definitely since this is my tier list, it's definitely not of any use to me. Next we have Lucky Jinx. So there's two guns in the game with the word lucky in it. I think I've only ever seen Lucky Jinx maybe drop like once or twice. It's a gun that I have not seen around a lot. It's a demolisher variant of a double gun, which I believe means that it has a bigger clip size. This has Perpetuum Mobile on it as a tier 2, and it has ultimate toxic bullets, which basically means that the same thing as ultimate freezing bullets, only this introduces toxic. Again, this is a double gun, and because the only time that you would really want to use anything with toxic would be if you are playing a Technomancer. And if you are playing a Technomancer, you're using a bullet class, your main ability for that blighted rounds already introduces toxic. So I would say it's kind of like a waste, and therefore Lucky Jinx is useless. Ooh, we're turning out to have like a bunch of useless guns. This is not good. Okay, so then we get on to another double gun. This is a burst fire variant, which is like the worst variant of a double gun. This is Shalrog's Excrescence. Terrible fucking name as well. This has ultimate burning bullets on it, and basically what this does is the same thing as the other ones we've been talking about, ultimate freezing and ultimate slow and all of that. This just causes burn. And again, the only time that you'd want this really is if you want to capitalize on things that deal more damage to stuff that's burning, and that would mean that you could potentially be playing a pyromancer, and then if you are, they are just better guns for that sort of thing, because it's an anomaly based if you're playing with fire. And so then there's, you know, you're not going to want to be using this. So Shalrogs, once again, unfortunately, is useless. And I mean, there really is a trend here. You can see that basically all of the double guns are getting slapped into useless. And that's not just because I don't like double guns. It's just as a weapon type, it doesn't really make any sense to me. That's it for the double guns though. Then we're going to move straight on to LMGs. And the first one we have is an LMG by the name of Damascus Offering. Now, Damascus Offering, I think, is a really solid choice if you want to run an LMG for two reasons. First of all, it is a standard variant, which is the more stable version of LMGs. It has a fairly large clip size, it has a decent range, and it has a decent range, a decent range for an LMG, and it has decent accuracy. So for those reasons alone, it's a really strong LMG already. Then if you couple it with the fact that it has Claymore Torrent on it, which is one of the best damage dealing mods for any weapon in the game right now, then this is just really good. That means that you can keep Claymore Torrent on you and stick something else on you, and it's just going to work really well. And one of the reasons why Claymore Torrent is so good is because of just the pure raw damage that it deals, and because it essentially turns any gun into an AoE clearinghouse. So for me, absolutely, Damascus Offering I think is a solid choice. And it really is something that you can you know, if you are wanting to introduce Claymore Torrent into your build and you don't necessarily have a decent shotgun that you can put it on, Damascus Offering is a great choice as well. You could also be thinking of playing something like Firepower Pyromancer, where this gun really shines and is really good because of the fact that it has this massive clip size. Then the next LMG we're going to look at is something called Grim Marrow. Now, Grim Marrow is a stabilizing variant of the LMG class, so it has I believe a slightly bigger clip size, no, slightly smaller clip size than the general. And this has a mod on called Singularity. Now this says killing shots create an anomaly singularity. When destroyed, the singularity explodes, dealing damage to enemies within a 6.5 meter radius. Now how this works is when you kill something, above it there'll be this orb that spawns. Now you have to shoot that orb, and when you deal enough damage to that orb, then that orb explodes and essentially deals a whole bunch of damage to the stuff around it. Again, in theory and on paper, this seems like it's really cool, but that explosion is relatively weak, first of all, compared to some of the other AoE effects like Claymore Torrent that we were just discussing. And secondly, due to the fact that you are having to adjust your aim and spend time aiming up and actually hitting that, and in that time the enemies that are below this orb could in actual fact reposition and move more towards you or to the sides, which means that explosion doesn't hit them, even though it covers 6.5 meters. But still, my point stands. So unfortunately, this to me, again, I don't see a lot of people running around with Singularity. I certainly have not. And so for me, I wouldn't even care about not having this mod, and I think I can just go ahead and toss this into the useless pile. Then we move over to a LMG called the Reaper. Now the Reaper has ultimate weakening bullets on it, which essentially causes weakness on enemies, which makes them take more damage. Which makes them deal less damage. Vulnerable makes them take more damage. I apologize, let me correct that. So this essentially makes the enemies deal less damage to you. And then its secondary ability is Death Chains, which I think is a really powerful and often overlooked tier 2 mod. I think Death Chains is really good. So I like Reaper, and I have a lot of people coming up to me saying like, dude, you gotta use Reaper, on builds where you debuff stuff and everything like that. You take ultimate weakening bullets off and you put something like, you know, ultimate damage link on there, and then you keep Death Chains on, and it's fucking broken as hell. So I definitely think that it's not something that I've messed around a lot, but I do understand there's a whole bunch of people that are fans of it and people that, you know, think it's really good. So I will definitely consider putting it into the limited use category. I think in certain builds, in certain niches, it can probably really shine. Next up, we have something called Roaring Umbra. Now, Roaring Umbra is a standard variation LMG as well, and its main tier 3 mod is called Kinetic Stomp. Now, Kinetic Stomp creates a seismic shock around you, dealing damage in a 5-meter radius, and it has a very low cooldown of 3 seconds. Now, this is often something that is included in builds that are speed running, and usually builds that have anomaly as their main way of dealing damage. People stick this onto their pistols, and so in the times that they're waiting for moaning winds or, you know, one of these reload mechanisms on their other guns for the cooldown to come down, they swap to this and they just fire off a bunch of rounds with the pistol or something like that, and it just deals a little bit more damage. So I definitely think that there was a time when this was like the fucking gun for Devastators to use, and certainly at the beginning of the game this was much sought after due to the fact that it dealt all this additional damage. But and essentially all you had to do was just fire your gun, and especially due to the fact that the playstyle of Devastator still remains to this kind of like in your face jump on enemies and be like in the mix of the fight, so you can always ensure that this pulsing damage is always present. But that style of play for Devastator has kind of like died down, especially due to the fact that there are better versions of this kind of AoE damage around you playstyle that's available. So to me, I definitely think that Roaring Umbra, you'd want to go get that Kinetic Stomp if you want to use that on pistols or something like that. But other than that, I don't really see you using this weapon a hell of a lot. Now, originally when I sat out, I wanted to do this all in one sitting, but it turned out to be a really long video, and so I decided to split it into 2 parts, because I don't expect anybody to sit here for nearly 45 minutes and listen to me drone on about weapons. However, let me know what you think about these choices so far. I've split the 2 videos up into categories, so look for part 2 dropping soon. Let me know what you think about some of the choices that I've made here. I don't think I was too unkind with some of the weapons, but I'm sure there's going to be some that you disagree with me on, which is good. Let's have a healthy conversation, and I love to be convinced otherwise with some of these. After all, this is all personal preference. Now I'm just a dude with a beard on the internet with an opinion. But thank you so much for watching. It's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.